I'm with the fascinating David Higgins, who has a background in critical national infrastructure projects and is currently with the Infrastructure Projects Authority. David, we have a lot to talk about. Do you think that the UK is currently set up to focus and fight some of the risks that we're facing?
In terms of critical national infrastructure, there was actually an article published, I think, in the last 24 hours that said an attack on critical national infrastructure was inevitable. And that was a government review of critical national infrastructure. I think there are a number of challenges, actually, in terms of, first of all, defining what's critical national infrastructure. So, for example, is Vodafone providing your internet as you walk into the station tonight critical? Well, it is to you if it's not there. But generally, I mean, things, if I'm trying to quantify critical national infrastructure, I'd say things like energy distribution, water, air traffic control, those kind of big ticket, healthcare, those kind of big ticket that impact everybody all at the same time type systems. And I think it's fair to say that there's different levels of maturity across critical national infrastructure preparation. I have some personal experience in energy distribution, and there's been quite a lot of work done, particularly around the second generation UK smart meters network, to take a pragmatic but quite a detailed approach to ensuring that that infrastructure is as secure as you can make it without spending $1 trillion a day on it. Mm-hmm. Other elements of critical national infrastructure, and we saw with the NHS with the WannaCry outbreak, which must have been last year, wasn't it? Or was it earlier this year? I lose track of time because I'm old. That they got cut out. And there were some fundamentals there that really weren't addressed. And they suffered because of that. And indeed, so did patients, which is not really a great thing, is it?
No, I think that had a massive knock-on effect, didn't it, with operations being cancelled. And that feels like actually it could have been a lot worse.
It could. And even now, I think the NHS is struggling with trying to find a holistic security strategy across the whole of the NHS, because of course the NHS really isn't one organisation. It's kind of an umbrella that pulls together the acute and the non-acute sectors. So yeah, I mean there's a lot to be done, and particularly around how critical national infrastructure organisations and organisations in general quantify risk, and how we measure what the risk is, and therefore what the control to mitigate that risk might be.
The WannaCry outbreak seemed to bring security and national infrastructure to the forefront of the public's mind. Yeah. Do you think that the public understand or even care about what is happening behind the scenes?
I think they care when it's not there. I think there's an assumption in the public that actually this stuff has been dealt with. So when you talk about we've got to increase our security capability for critical national infrastructure, the public kind of think that's already happened. So when it's found wanting, it does come as a bit of a shock to the public.
Now, you wrote a very interesting article called "Security is a State of Mind, Not a State."
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that's really building on the if you go into an organisation and say, "How secure are you?" they'll say, "We are secure." Right? And most boards want absolute security, and most technology vendors guarantee you absolute security. But if that's the case, why do people keep getting breached? Okay, everything gets breached on a fairly regular basis. So something's not working. And I started thinking about this probably about 18 months or 2 years ago. And this started really as a plea for better threat intelligence. And I sort of wrote an article, I think, about security is a human, not artificial intelligence problem. This has been a sort of development of that. So if we think about security, the way that you come up with your security posture is you look at the threat perimeter and you try and work out what threat perimeter is doing. Now, if you think about threat intelligence, generally, unless you are the security services, you don't have a really guaranteed view of what that threat perimeter is, what their motivation is, what their disposition is, and you can know what their tooling are, but you don't really know how they're going to use it and where they're going to go next week, which was the case with WannaCry. Okay, so you sort of take a best guess at that, and then based on your character and your personality, of which more later, you try and work out based on your risk profile or the aggregation of acceptable risk across a group of people, what your response would be to that. And really the outcome of that is when you say, this is our risk position, our security position, it's based on what your psychological profile, the makeup of your character, infers from that threat perimeter. So it's not an absolute factor, and we're all different. Okay, everybody has a slightly different character. So I've been working with the University of East London and a researcher there called Shireen Walton, and they're looking at how you might measure the psychological profile of a cyber defender based on what we call the OSIN model, to see how much risk they're prepared to take. And the idea is, or the intention is, that we're going to try and look at a group of cyber defenders, if you like. It'd be nice to get cyber attackers, but they're unlikely to turn up to answer the questionnaire. to a set of cyber defenders and see what the makeup of the characters are across the group, because obviously there's kind of like most things in life, there's an optimum position for the job that you're doing. And then we'll look at how, for those people who are not in the sweet spot, how you could turn people into that sweet spot. Now, I was actually talking to a neurologist last week. This is on a professional basis rather than a personal basis, about actually how the mind works. So if I have a particular mindset, and kind of, it's not new age, it's actually quite scientific stuff. For example, if you just read an article, that changes the chemical composition of your brain as you acquire that information from reading the article. But that's just a chemical change, and it doesn't last very long. It maybe lasts about a day, and then you kind of lose that ability to synthesize information. If you then do some more of that, you get some increase in connections between the bits of your brain that you're using to read that. And the classic example I use for this is if we scan the head of a London taxi driver, you would actually see within their brains, and this is what the neurologist was talking to me about last week, that actually the bit of their brain that is to do with spatial awareness, i.e. that map of London they keep in their head, is more developed than people who are not London taxi drivers, and is more active too because they're using it all the time. Mm-hmm. So really, if you think about the part of your brain used when you're synthesizing risk and synthesizing response to risk, we need to find a way to optimize that part of our thought process, because security is what you think it is.
Now that feels like it's quite topical. There's a lot of talk amongst organisations around gender diversity and neurodiversity as well. Mm-hmm. So is that something that's come through in the work you've been doing?
It has, and these are quite broad statements, but as I said earlier, everybody's brain is different, and female brains are different to male brains. We're wired slightly differently. And certainly what I've found through some of the work that I've done, particularly on more sensitive programs, is that there is a higher degree of objectivity when working with female cyber professionals, and perhaps not with males. That's going to get me some mail, isn't it? But and is that in terms of cyber natural selection, is that a better position to be in? Well, it's much better not to bring prejudice to risk analysis, but we all bring our own prejudice, don't we? We all bring our own psychological frameworks. So the intent is to try and find as broad a community that we can to assess, what their individual characters are like, or their cyber psychological indexes are. And then actually we might be able to get some empirical evidence that shows, who's got which better bit of the character profile, if you like.
And I think that could be really powerful, so that people get told that they ought to have more diverse teams, but being shown the evidence as to why might need some help.
Well, a bit of evidence would be quite useful, wouldn't it? And this is not sort of new statistics from me, but despite all the efforts, there isn't a huge amount of gender diversity in cybersecurity, and I think that may well be because it's just a lot of blokes thinking like a lot of blokes do, based on their kind of psychological profile. And that's not a particularly, engaging or inclusive environment for people who don't think like that. So, there is always a risk. I talk about it in some paper I wrote quite recently about groupthink. Mm-hmm. Where if you recruit people who think like you and you all look at the same problem, then you end up with the same answer. And there's very little opportunity for challenge in that kind of environment. And one of the things that you need in the security space is, are you sure? Do you really? But do you really know this? And again, that kind of that psychological profile, whether you're neurotic or you're kind of very outgoing, you want to take a lot of risk, that kind of thing. So it's really quite important that we understand the way we think about these things and try and get a better answer.
And as we go forward into the next 12 months, what do you think is going to happen for cybersecurity?
Oh, I think I think the rate of change will increase. I mean, I've been working in security, or I've been working in security before security was invented, but certainly the rate of change, I read and see a lot about the attack surface starting to use artificial intelligence. That doesn't bother me so much as an attack vector. I think what bothers me is the use of artificial intelligence to create more personally crafted attacks. You know, if I gathered lots of information about you, about your the way you like to work, your character, the way you write things, the things you're interested in, I could craft a much more personal phishing attack, for example, that has a higher probability of you doing what I want you to do. And yeah, I mean, I think that we'll see a ramping up of what I call intelligence warfare, where the opposition will be seeking to exploit our mental weaknesses, the kind of things I was talking about earlier, as a vector to get into organisations. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be more of the same. I think the rate's going to go up, and I think our ability to think fast and think right is going to become more important.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for speaking with me this evening. I think it's been really fascinating.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.